I'll make my final stay. That's what I call bad company. I won't deny. Right till the day we die. Oh, you're beautiful. Thank you. What you're getting is rough and ready, but it's real.
I was always aware of music because in my home in Middlesbrough, we always had the radio on. It was on all day. So we listened to things, Elvis would come on, or Frank Sinatra, and lots of the pop through the 50s. And I didn't really realise I was influenced by it, but looking back, I think I was, you know.
I first got into music, oh God, when I was about 13. I was brought up on the border of Wales, a little place called Newcastle on Clun.
Logically speaking, I was a late starter because I didn't start playing until I was 18. But my first intro into playing in bands was in a local dance band, if you will. You know, playing standards and piano and accordion and all that sort of thing.
I saw my first TV programme at about, I guess, 14. It was called All That Jazz, and it had featured big band jazz, you know, swing bands. And I was fascinated by the drummer.
And I just learnt to sort of pick up by ear, you know, like chord changes and what have you. I think I was not really doing that much musically at all. And then I got involved with some local bands in Hereford, which ended up being the basis of Mott the Hoople, you know, all different guys from different local bands. But to that point, it was just playing like in local village halls, you know, the usual stuff.
And it wasn't until, I suppose I became a teenager, really, that I started to be interested in the pop music of the day, which was the Beatles and the Stones, etc. But when I heard the Rolling Stones sing "I Just Want to Make Love to You," which was it's an old blues song, I heard something different from the pop, really. Although I still love the Beatles and the Stones, and I dug a little deeper and discovered blues, really, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and John Lee Hooker, and it was a whole new world to me. That's the thing that really deeply influenced me. I've always tried to emulate those guys because when I heard, say, you know, Wilson Pickett singing or Elmore James, you know, and they'd hit a way of singing, and I'd go, that's it, that's the way to do it, you know.
I went to 2 Windsor Jazz Festivals, and that really opened my eyes. But I knew that I wanted to be a drummer. I wanted to try my hand at playing drums. So I made a deal with my parents that after I got my A-levels, give me 2 years, and if nothing happens in 2 years, I'll go to university. And it was during those 2 years that, you know, I came down to London, did all sorts of jobs, answered auditions, and in the last couple of months of those 2 years, I met Paul Kossoff in Black Cat Bones. So, you know, the drawbridge was coming down, and I was fully prepared to go to university.
My father bought me a 6-string guitar. Actually, that's how I got into music, really, because that made me eligible to join the class band at school, you see. All you had to do is have an instrument. So we started playing together in somebody's kitchen, and I stayed with it. I switched from 6-string. We needed a bass player, so I traded that in and got myself a bass, and I played bass for a while and sang. And then I put the bass down and just focused on singing, you know, because that's what the band wanted me to do. But I always found that it was helpful to be able to play piano and guitar, acoustically, electrically, and the bass, for songwriting, when I would write on any of those instruments. I was with a band called Brown Sugar, and they started playing a riff. Doom, 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 doom. And I started to sing lyrics over that, and it was a long dusty road to nowhere. Doom, doom. And I said to the guys, well, did you write that riff? And they said, oh, no, it's some old blues riff, you see, thing. But that's what made me think, then if I come up with my own riff. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I came up with the riff, doom, 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 doodle, doom, doodle, doom, 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 doodle. And then I wrote Walk in My Shadow, that was the first song. I wrote, and that appeared on the Tons of Subs album with Free. And once that had happened, I was kind of off and running, really, because I thought, wow, I can write songs now, you know.
I ran into Paul Kossoff at this gig, the Nag's Head. You know, the blues boom was huge in London at that time. And I didn't think the Black Cat Bones were that good, but Kossoff was wonderful. And I said during the break, you know, he came off stage, he said, oh, you know, I think you're great, but I think your drummer's crap. And he said, well, it's funny you should say that because he's leaving tonight and we're having auditions tomorrow. So anyway, I went along, long story short, I got the job and I played with Koss in Black Cat Bones for about 6 months, during which time he said, I know this great singer who's in a band called Brown Sugar and he's leaving and he wants to form a band. And, you know, would you like to come along? And I said, yeah. And, you know, so there was 3 of us. And then we had to find a bass player. We knew Alexis Corner, who mentored Paul Kossoff. He was a family friend. And he said, I know this great little kid, Andy Fraser. He was playing with John Mayall for 6 months. We went, whoa. And he's just got the sack. And we were just staggered that a 15-year-old kid could play that well. And we asked him later if he'd like to join the band. We had a rehearsal there the first time the 4 of us got together. And during those rehearsals, Alexis came along just to see us, you know, and we were stumped for a name. And he'd been in a band called Free at Last with Graham Bond and Baker. And he said, you know, why don't you call the band Free? And so we said, yeah, okay. And then we played, Alexis took us on the road for a couple of months. We did about, I guess, 12 or 15 shows with Alexis. And we were off and running.
There she stood in the street, smiling from her head to her feet. I said, what is this now, baby? Maybe she's in need of a kiss. I said, hey, what's your name, baby? Maybe we can see things the same. Now don't you wait, or hesitate. Let's move before they raise the parking rate. All right now, baby, it's all right now. All right now, baby, it's all right.
We were a blues band, I mean, but we were a little bit more than a blues band. We wanted to be like a progressive blues band, not just Rock Me Baby and, you know, the old standards. We wanted to do, you know, we wanted to write our own stuff.
To my place, watching every move on her face.
And I didn't really realise I was a songwriter until Island Records stuck a publishing contract in front of me and said, okay. I said, what's this? He said, this is the publishing contract and we want you to sign it, blah, 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 blah. And I said, it says, well, songwriter. He says, yeah, you're a songwriter now. You've got songs on the album. I went, that was the moment I realised, hey, I'm a songwriter, you know. And then they stole them all for the contract. No, I'm just kidding.
We played hundreds of shows and we built up a very good following. And All Right Now is a sort of a catalytic thing whereby it just blew everything up in a nice way. I mean, the fact that we were now on TV, Top of the Pops or whatever, you know, we were available to a lot of people. I remember the first tour that we did behind All Right Now, we were playing, instead of playing towns one after the other, we were playing countries, you know, Holland, France, Belgium, Germany, Scandinavia. Whereas before it was just, you know, up and down the M1 and down to Cornwall and back. So it was a lot of pressure, and ultimately it brought about our demise, I think.
Well, we've been working for 2 years, fairly solidly around England and Europe, and we'd had a couple of singles out and 2 albums, which had done fairly well, you know, but nothing phenomenal. And then All Right Now came along, you know, and sort of was a hit in just about every major country. And it opened up the market incredibly, and we found that we were playing to countries that normally we would probably never have gone to.
What are Free intending to do when they go back to England?
Rest. I tell you.
A long rest.
Not many people know, but we did 2 Isle of Wight festivals. And the first one, which was not the big one, was in '69, and we did about a 20-minute set. But the big one was, of course, in 1970. We had the hit, and it was while we were waiting to go on the ferry, Pete Townsend came up and knocked on our transit window and said, "I love that fucking song of yours," and then walked off. And we're going, wow. Kossoff's demise started after the first breakup. We had the disappointment, the follow-up to All Right Now. You know, we had Highway after Fire and Water. We released Steeler, which I thought was a great song, but it wasn't a hit record. That didn't do very well. Highway didn't do very well. So we took it personally, and Andy and Paul made the decision that after Highway, after the world tour, that was it. And it broke our hearts, so I'll be honest, it really, it upset me, but it devastated Koss. So, you know, I know now that he was an addict, what I know now about addiction, because I'm in the program myself. And he was born an addict, and this breakup completely devastated him.
The basis of Mark the Hooper was formed in the band we had in Hereford. Pete Watts, myself, Vernon Allen, Dale Griffin the drummer, and a singer called Stan Tippins. He was the original singer, and we went to London to try and get a foot in the door with Island Records, and in the days when they were in Oxford Street. You know, it is getting frustrating because you'd sit around all day and wait and then suddenly say, oh, he's gone home for the day. I was trying to see Guy Stevens. So in the end, I just burst into his office one day. I said, I'm fed up with doing, you know, I'm not going to come all the way down from Hereford and waste my time, blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, come in, I like your attitude. And that sort of sparked it off with Guy. Because Guy Stevens was then, in the early days of Ireland, he was the A&R man, if you will, looking for talent. And he liked the band. He wanted to replace the singer, you know, for the look and the image and all the rest of it. So that's how we came across Ian. And Guy Stevens liked the look of him with the shades and the curly hair. And that was the basis of the start of Mott, really, yeah.
So the first night I met Mick was sometime in '69, I would imagine, walking in for the audition in Regent South.
We had a good live following, but we couldn't really sell records. We weren't that commercially successful. We tried different styles, different albums, different singles, to the point that we were getting very frustrated and losing money, decided to knock it on the head. And unbeknownst to us, David Bowie had heard about this, suggested we do one of his songs that he was willing to offer to us to do.
We were already dead to radio. We'd had a couple of singles out already, and radio just didn't want to know. But we also know we had to keep, you know, we were filling everywhere, and you don't fill everywhere over a long period of time if you don't have a hit. So it was getting to the point where something had to happen. And he came back with Dudes.
So he sent us the tape, a reel-to-reel tape with all the young dudes on one track, and the Suffragette City was the other one, and a nice handwritten letter. And we loved the song, of course, and then he said, well, why don't you come record it and I'll produce it for you. But that really turned our fortunes round. Suddenly you get a break and then the band changes into a different... So it wasn't the same band for me. It had lost its underground sort of subversive feel and had become more of a sort of a pop band, you know, and the top of the pops, and Ian got into writing songs in a certain vein that were kind of based on all the young dudes, which is great, you know.
Pete Watts, the bass player, and Mick, they were the two writers. They didn't really want a writer. And then after a while, Pete Watts couldn't be bothered, so I just started doing it, you know, with Mick.
it went away from the original concept of Mott, and I wanted to play something a bit more earthy, a bit more rough, if you like. And that's when I hooked up with Paul. He was out supporting us on Mott the Hoople tour with the band he had then called Peace. And of course I'd always liked his singing anyway from the Free days. And we got on really well, and I had a load of songs that we weren't doing with Mott that I'd written.
Mick was coming in with like Ready for Love. He came in with Can't Get Enough, and I couldn't sing them.
Paul was the sort of guy that could sing the sort of songs I was writing.
And it was really sad because we had a very powerful band that was selling out everywhere, but it was just pissing him off. And I knew exactly how he felt, because if it had been him that had a couple of hits on that particular record, then I would have probably left. So it was an unfortunate kind of situation.
Initially we were just going to record some stuff, me and Paul. We hadn't thought about forming a group then. It was just to record some songs that we had. I had some songs, he had some songs. We worked together really well.
With Mick's songs, I can step into them. Things like Simple Man, Moving On, Can't Get Enough of Your Love. I can step into them, and they're very simple, and that leaves me a lot of room to play, and do my vocal thing.
It was very funny because it was just Paul and I writing songs and working out stuff together. And Simon turned up one day from one of his world jaunts to wherever.
They said, well, you want to get a band together. And I was in Brazil, and I believe I called Paul to see how things were. And he said, look, you fancy playing drums in this band that me and Mick are putting together? And I love Mick. Mick was so funny. I mean, I love him to this day. He's just a great character, and he's a very, very good player. So I said, yeah, man, I'd love to.
Well, I was putting the band together with Mick at my cottage, and I had a friend of mine, Clive Coulson, had worked for free earlier, and he came around to my place, and he now worked with Led Zeppelin, and we got talking, and I said, well, we need a manager. And he said, well, why don't you give Peter Grant a call? Because they have just formed a new company, Swan Song, and they're kind of, talent scouting.
It was a mark of accomplishment for a rock superstar to have their own label. The Beatles had Apple, and then the Rolling Stones had Rolling Stones Records, and the Jefferson Airplane had Grunt Records. So for one thing, it was a mark of status to have their own label and to be able to develop some other artists.
And so I gave him a call, and he said, and it was kind of nervy, really, because there's me calling this, manager of Led Zeppelin, who were bigger than God at the time,
The members of Led Zeppelin and Peter thought they had good taste in music and that they could do a good job of picking some artists and attracting them, because Zeppelin was at the time the biggest band in the world commercially in terms of their concert sales and their record sales and so on, and that it would be a prestigious thing for a new act to say, hey, I'm on Led Zeppelin's label.
And luckily, he said he'd be interested in hearing us, which we couldn't believe our luck. And he arranged to come and see us at a rehearsal shortly after that.
He said, yeah. He said, yeah, I'm interested in you, yeah. And he came round, and I said, well, Peter, I come with a band, and we're going to be called Bad Company. And they weren't sure about that. I've had problems in the past with names. But, I wanted to stick to my guns, and Bad Company is the Bad Company it was.
Funny thing was, when we were rehearsing, we didn't know he was there. We were rehearsing in this village hall in Surrey, in Albury, near Paul's place. And looking at the watch, I thought, well, he'll be here in a minute. And we carried on playing, and then it was 2 o'clock, then it was 3 o'clock, then it was 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. By the time it came to about 6 o'clock, Paul said, oh, this is ridiculous. He said, he's not going to turn up. We must be kidding ourselves, And we all got really pissed off and played like with vengeance and decided to go to the pub. And when we went out to the hall, there was Peter sitting in his car. And Paul said something like, oh, you turned up then. He said, well, I've been here for ages, actually. He said, I didn't want to come in, and I just wanted to hear you in your natural state. Thinking he was late, we all got pissed off and played, demonically, which he thought was great. And then he took us on, yeah.
He liked what we were doing. I had Rocksteady, we had Can't Get Enough of Your Love, we were playing Bad Company, the song. So we had some good songs going on,
Some were mine and Paul's, some were Paul's, but Yes, that was the basic essence of it.
Peter said to me, I'm not going to sign you guys up, but we'll just try it. We'll just try it for 6 months on a basis of a handshake. And so I said, okay, let's go.
He was one of the lads, you know, he was very much on the side of the musician, you know, and didn't stand any nonsense from the business side of it.
Don't fucking talk to me, it's my bloody act. I do bet I'll leave you anytime. You couldn't even get my starting line.
Peter did what was good for Zeppelin. Peter understood that the extra money that they were paying the agency after a certain point was wasted because Zeppelin didn't need an agent anymore, in his opinion. Promoters all wanted them, and he also renegotiated the money on behalf of the band with promoters too, and kind of was the architect of what's called a 90-10 deal, which meant the artist would make 90% of the net. Prior to that, 50-50 was the paradigm. So Peter was a real trailblazer in terms of getting more money for artists.
He was very keen to let us be ourselves. He didn't impose himself in production or song choice or anything like that. He just wanted us to do what we wanted to do.
Peter really believed in Bad Company. And I remember when he first gave me the record and I heard it, and I think I went to a studio and heard some music and met them or whatever, he was very worried that I wasn't sufficiently excited. And he really, Peter Grant, was 300 pounds. He'd been a former professional wrestler. He was an extremely intimidating guy to begin with. And he was very insistent that I understand how much this meant to him and how strongly he felt about it.
I was all very gentlemanly, and he said, you know, you do the music and I'll take care of the business. And he did, you know. It was great. I mean, he divided his time between us and Zeppelin at the time, because we were both doing big stuff in America by then.
Because he wasn't that savvy about music, which was probably one of his saving graces. He didn't know if F went with A minor or if that bit went with that. He just knew what he felt. And I remember him saying to Robert Plant and Paul at another time was, I just want you to wear something bright and jump up and down a bit. It was a very knee-jerk reaction that he had for things. And he had this incredible business acumen as well. Plus this 300-pound wrestler, ex-wrestler persona behind it. I mean, he was wonderful.
Whenever he'd come to a show, at some point he'd come to every crew member, look you straight in the eye and say, is everything all right? Is there anything that I can do for you? And he meant it. He not only looked after his band, he looked after everybody. If you were in, you were in. But by the same time, if you did something wrong against Bad Company or Led Zeppelin, you might as well just pack your shit because you were done.
Did we get on with him? Yes. Well, yes and no. I, being the naive country kid, questioned him about his underworld dealings. Great, I must have been out of my fucking mind. I said, Mr. Grant, I understand that you have some... I can't believe I said it. You have connections with the London underworld. Is this true? And he was totally straight. He says, no. And then the next band meeting we had, he pulled out this submachine gun full of ping pong balls. And went brrrr, and I'm ducking. But that was me, the completely naive green country. And he loved me for it. What he did for us was wonderful. And I think of him most days. I loved him. He was like a dad to me.
We hadn't even settled on a bass player at the time. Although I liked the guy we were trying, he was a Welsh guy, he didn't want the gig, strange enough, so we had to keep looking.
We had the three of us, Simon, myself and Paul, for ages. We kept trying out all these different bass players, and they were all very good. But they didn't quite click chemistry-wise.
Boz wasn't even there in the lineup when Peter Grant came to see us.
No, he came in at the last minute, Boz. We were desperate to do this record, and we took him on, not knowing what we'd taken on, but it turned out to be great. He was a real character. I took to him straight away, because he wasn't that experienced on the bass then, and I loved it when he turned up for rehearsals, like all the other bass players were so dead keen to play. We said to Boz, what do you want to do? He said, I want to go to the pub. Let's go to the pub. He didn't want to play, he just wanted to hang out. So I thought that was great. So, of course, we went to the pub and got completely pissed, played a load of rubbish, and said he was in. And then next day, Paul phones up and said, what was he like? I said, no, I was drunk. He said, so was I. He said, I think I gave him the job.
We had a list of bass players, and Boz was right at the bottom, number 16, I'll never forget, because we weren't really big fans of King Crimson.
Both went to pick him at the station, you said, quick, make drive on, he's bald. Paul's done this, I can't
Yeah, we kept auditioning, we auditioned for months. And one guy, we just kept driving because he looked so bad, he was dribbling a bit.
Oh, no, I had a list, as I did. I didn't cut that bit.
Boz was the last guy, and
we auditioned a lot of
bass players at the station, you were wonderful.
Yeah, they were all great.
But Boz was the last resort, and it happened to be...
One of them looked exactly like Eric Clapton. We could have him in the band because he looked too much
You
like
said that. That was why he couldn't get in the... I had all these reasons why he couldn't look like Eric Clapton, bald at the station, foaming at the mouth.
He could stand up there and stare at 50,000 people, play bass like it was nothing. He absolutely had that thing, the ability to do it, he had in abundance. The desire to do it, if there was anything that made him uncomfortable, it was that. Certainly wasn't the music.
But he was endearing. I love Boz, because he was actually a singer first and foremost.
Boz was the singer in King Crimson. I knew he was a bass player.
He bluffed it. It said bass player, singer wanted, and he couldn't play the bass at all. So Robert Fripp taught him how to play the basics. And then, of course, he improved and learnt more about the instrument from then on.
And he played the bass in a very melodic manner.
It was a strange thing for him at the time because obviously his peers were Jack Bruce and Alan Spencer and all these amazing bass players. So he was like, he had to get in there real hard and get his stuff together, which he did real quick actually, and developed quite a phenomenal technique compared to most rock bass players. He had a very exacting technique on the bass.
He could play some high things, do 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 do. You know, what was that? Ready for Love or something?
Yeah, the slides.
Yeah, he did some really.
He played a fretless bass, which is very hard to do, an Ampeg scroll neck.
I thought he was actually going to develop it and develop it with a company and get his own thing. It was very, very useful in certain tunes where it could go lower than most and could actually slide about. Difficult to play because you don't have any, frets making it obvious where everything is. So you have to be pretty accurate.
I had never worked with a fretless bass before, and I was really intrigued. It's a very kind of provocative sound. You know, it's got a very interesting aspect. I had just been working with the basic rock and roll bass players that went bum 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 bum. And he came more from an R&B background, and I thought it was perfect for the band.
When he first joined the band, he came up with great ideas, unusual, like that skip beat in Burning Sky, that was his idea. And it just...
No, he had some he was really innovative.
Gone, he wrote a song called Gone, Gone,
If we were playing in D, we'd play in F sharp instead of the D root. You know, he always found not the obvious thing to play, and didn't feel like making the chorus. He doesn't actually play the do-do, he just comes on the bush. And everybody else does, bass player goes do-do, boom. But he didn't do the do-do, he just went...
He was not your normal bass player.
So he left holes, which is great. And I remember years ago, we were doing all these interviews in America, when we just come out and it was going on about how great the rhythm section was. And they were saying to Boz, I really like your style, so economical. So, to be honest, I didn't know what to play, so I just stopped.
We're gonna make it,
Typically understated. He was a very deep thinker about music. Boz was very, very passionate. He wasn't just somebody who liked music or loved music. He was a musicologist, and you could go as deep as you wanted to about classical music. He was a massive Schoenberg fan. He introduced me to George Russell's Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organisation when I was about 12. He was very, very deep into music. So his ideas of space and tone and passing notes were thought about a lot.
I'm just a simple man. Yeah. Freedom is the only thing. Means a damn to me. I'm just a simple man.
I've got to say, the first few years in Bad Company were the happiest of my life, because we had 4 guys who were just having fun. We didn't have to worry about guitarists falling over. We didn't have to worry about deadlines to meet. We had a superb management. We had, everything was clear. It was only left for us to play, and there was such a sense of relief after Free that I'm speaking for myself, not for Paul. You know, I loved it, and we could do no wrong. It was just wonderful.
We all got on famously. There was a lot of energy there, you know, the four of us.
I think there was a compatibility. I can sing Mick's songs, you know, and he can play mine. So that's really probably the nucleus of the band, was that songwriting team, because that's how we hooked up in the first place. To me, it was immediately an advantage, because it's hard to take on the role of songwriting songwriting is really the lifeblood of any band.
Yeah.
And it's a tough call to keep on coming up with new stuff and all the time, you know. And there's also that sense of you know, a little bit of competition. You did that, so I'll do this, and
yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, you could throw songs at each other, and there's also the thing of, I can't get this thing finished. Why, have you got any ideas for this? And then you can amalgamate ideas. Oh, I've got a bit to work with that.
That's right.
And off
Feel
you
Like
go.
Making Love,
Yeah.
Well, Feel Like Making Love was a classic example.
Paul had the verse and I had the riff, and it just worked together. We captured what we're singing about, you know.
Yeah.
The boy bit and the girl bit. But Simon's a great writer as well. He's written some great stuff, and I think that's why he's so good to play with as a drummer, because he does understand music. He's not just a drummer, you know, he's a great drummer, but he also plays guitar and piano, sings, writes songs, so he has a great empathy for a song. And as a guitar player, I find that great as in a drummer, that actually listens to the words and takes the dynamics where the songs go in, instead of just crashing through it like some drummers will just, I'm the drummer, that, you know, whoosh, see you at the end. He rides through the song beautifully, you know.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah, I think really that's the only way to be. You know, I can't do I can't be doing with people that aren't listening. That's music is actually listening to each other and reacting and bouncing off each other. That is what it is. You know, it's not. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It would drive me nuts if everybody was playing and just not listening to each other. And it's all about me. Blah,
We've
blah,
all
blah.
played with people like that in various jam situations. Jamming with people. Then you realise how lucky we are, because, you know, it's not about technique or, you know, showing off. It's about playing with other people.
Everybody knew that this was going to be, it was right. It was Paul Rodgers and Mick Ralphs and Simon all together. Everybody knew it would be good. To give you an example, the first UK tour they did, there was no album out, there was no single out. It was pretty much word of mouth that the band was together, and they sold out a national tour as it was then, Hammersmith Odeon, Newcastle City Hall, like the headlining thing. You couldn't get a ticket, and they didn't have an album out. It was just simply word of mouth, and it was completely sold out.
We were seasoned veterans in our early 20s, and we had a great repertoire. We'd been around a bit, and we had the backing of Led Zeppelin. And Peter Grant, who was possibly the best manager that I ever worked with. We had a good set. We had, you know, Paul was a great singer. We could do no wrong.
If I hear you knocking hard upon my door, ain't no way that I'm gonna answer that. Cheating is one thing and lying is another. When I say it's over, that's it. I'm gonna quit.
I believe the first album went to #1, or was it back when Turner Overdrive beat us by? I don't know. There's always someone just preventing us. But it was a great debut album, and we were off and running.
Peter phoned me, or Paul, or both of us, and said, we've got this Ronnie Lane's mobile studio and this empty house, and Zeppelin aren't going to go in now because Bonzo's not well and they want to have some weeks off. Why don't you go in there and lay down some tracks? And we said, right. We were in there like a shot.
And we had the guitar in one room, we had maybe the vocal on the balcony somewhere, and drums in the foyer. It just was cool.
Paul sang outside, on one of the Bad Company in the moonlight.
We set the mic up way out in the field and everything, and there was a full moon and the wind blowing across it and stuff, you know. And it was incredibly atmospheric, because I was standing out there in the dark with headphones on, and I could just hear the music, you know, and just my voice. And it was a very cosmic place to be, and it made for a good atmosphere.
I suggested that Paul sing outside. It was a little chilly night, and I remember that because at the end of the song Bad Company, there's a little, it goes, and the cold wind blows. You know, it's a little ad-lib at the end because he was really cold. These are the days before reverb, before digital reverb. You had to have either a live chamber or a plate. You didn't have that in a little mobile truck. So you looked for little nooks and crannies that you could create a sound with.
And lay down all the backing tracks, vocals, overdubs in 2 weeks, yeah.
Took 10 days.
We just lammed it down.
I think that one of the things that made that first album so important was that as a group, they had gotten together. And if you look at Paul Rodgers, who had an amazing run with Free, but also had Andy Fraser as his other writer in the group. Andy was much more an R&B guy. Paul had some good ballads that he had stored. And if you look at Mott the Hoople, Mick took a backseat to Ian Hunter in a lot of the writing capacity. And he had some good rockers like Can't Get Enough of Your Love and all that. He put them together in those days, that rocker guy and the ballad guy. And you had a lot of great material.
Well, we'd been rehearsing and we were bursting to get this stuff down. And the interesting thing was at that time, I didn't really have too much of a vision of what the band would be. It was really a bunch of guys with a bunch of songs, really, and we put everything down that we had.
We went down there and recorded more material than we needed, actually. There was a song called Superstar Women that I think eventually came out, but that I really liked that didn't make the cut.
So there was no feeling of, well, you know, all the songs have got to sound this way, or they've all got to sound this way or that way. There was everything from Bad Company to Seagull, you know, all of the songs, and it made for an interesting album. And I've always liked that if there's such a thing as a format for doing things, that would be the best way. Instead of saying, well, all the songs have got to be in a certain sort of way, you know, a certain character or a certain thing. They can be totally different. The more different, the better, I think.
It went very quickly because they were well rehearsed. They had a lot of good ideas.
And the song Bad Company, for instance, I had that, having got the idea of this sort of dark, mysterious, vast expanse of the Wild West, you know, this lawless, featureless area where you want to go out and try and settle. And the chords seem to portray this feeling of being way out there and having to survive with yourself, your family, whatever, however you could, in a lawless world of nature, really, a wild place. And so I had all the structure of that, and Simon came around and I said, here's a song I'm working on. So Simon threw a few lines in for me with that, and that became Bad Company.
6 gun in my hand, behind a gun, I make my final stand. That's why they call me Bad Company, I can't deny. Bad Company till the day I die.
I mean, we did tour in England and Europe, which was very well received. The next logical step was going to the States, and we did our first big tour supporting Edgar Winter, and then the following tour we were headlining.
The first Bad Company album, Bad Co., was one of those rare records that people heard it once and they liked it. I remember I did a press mailing, and 2 days later, I was at a party, and Joan Downs, who was then the music writer and editor for Time magazine, came up to me and said, "Wow, Bad Company is great." And I was like so surprised that she had bothered to listen to it or thought it was great. And similarly, the song Can't Get Enough of Your Love was just so perfect for American rock and roll radio, 1974, that the promotion people in Atlantic were very delighted with the record.
One of the last shows was in Boston, and Peter Grant flew up. And he always had this habit of giving us a little pep talk before we went on. He says, "You've had a good tour, you've done well, and I just want to show you something before you go on stage. And he whipped back this towel which was on the table, and there were 4 gold albums. The first album had been certified gold, and we just went, we had no idea. Because there was no internet in those days, there was no, we just didn't know how well it was going. So anyway, he says, here, well done, boys, now get the fuck out of here and go and do what you do well.
This was a bullseye in terms of rock commerciality in 1974, and there was very little difficulty in getting them on tour, getting it on the radio, getting press for them, and it went to #1 very, very quickly.
So when we came back the next time, in 75, our first tour where we headlined, I mean, we went from an opening act to headlining.
It meant we did a lot of shows, it seemed to me. We were flat out on the road and sort of trying to catch up with ourselves. And when we suddenly confronted with the studio again, hey, record another album, we were like, whew, okay, what did we do the first time? And I had to, with hindsight, I can, think back and say, oh, this is what we did and this is how it was. But at that time, it was just a whirlwind, really. And so we were back in the studio, ready to do another album. And it mostly reflected our experiences on the road at that time.
I'd like to apologise for Paul not being here, but he's been attacked by some notorious lady, I think, and
he's been
absconded with.
But, he sends his regards and he thanks you.
You have all your life to make your first album, or at least as long as it takes to get there. Next thing you know, you're back in the studio to do it again. We went to Clearwell Castle, I think, and it was a little bit different, though. It wasn't. I didn't find it quite so organic in the sense that the place was also run commercially, and they had parties for, you could do a medieval party there, and everybody got dressed up in armour, suits of armour, and drank mead, and they roasted pigs and stuff like that, and it was really weird sometimes. Yeah, I'd be like, where's the bass player? And I'd go through all these corridors and things, and there'd be a big party going on, and all these people dressed in medieval gear, and right in the middle of it all would be Boz, drinking mead and eating, roast pig. Boz, we've got a session to do, come on, So it was a little bit different, but it was still very atmospheric.
I heard you produced your last album in a Welsh castle.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that?
We just fancied doing it in a situation where we could be just the band together. Because I don't know if you're familiar with studios, but there's a tendency to waste a lot of time in studios, I think.
It's a bit sterile.
With people coming in and out all the time, and there's an atmosphere of having to make a record.
Down through the years, I've shared a lot of the songs that I've written with the band, and I do that because to give a sense of cohesion, and it's not all about me,
He'd have an idea and he'd play it to me, and then we'd chuck it around, and I'd come up with a bit for it, or a chorus, or a middle eight. But I think generally, he wrote some good songs on his own, and I wrote some good songs on my own, like Shooting Star he wrote on his own. Good Lovin Gone Bad I wrote. This is the second album now. So we were both quite prolific at the time. So we used to do that, he'd have an idea, and I'd say, well, it needs, it's all very nice, but it needs something here, like give it a bit of action, like Feel Like Making Love.
Feel Like Making Love was a song that I'd been working on. I mean, I had on the back burner. I have lots of songs on the back burner. I'm sure a lot of songwriters do. It's, not everything gets finished. From my time with Free, actually, when I was touring with them in San Francisco, I had some experiences out there, and that song came from that.
Feel Like Making Love was 2 songs. He had the verse and I had the chorus.
And I said to Mick, here's this idea I had, baby, when I think about you. And I said, just need something to take this somewhere. And he comes up with, bam, 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 and I went, okay, feel like making, and that's how that came about.
Oh yeah, feel like making love. Ooh, feel like making love. Feel like making love to you.
I sometimes feel like they're almost written through you sometimes. Shooting Star was a song like that, because I was just walking along, and I think I was out at my cottage, and I started to sing, Johnny was a schoolboy when he heard his first Beatles song. And I went, I must have heard that on the radio somewhere. And I went, no. And I ran back in there, and I started to work out the chords and stuff, And the song just flowed out. And I couldn't believe really that no one had thought to, no other songwriter had come up with the idea of equating a shooting star with a shooting star, you know, like the idea of burning out too early and that kind of thing. So, you know, I just thought it was a good idea. One of these days I want to create a musical around Shooting Star and expand the story, and I think that would be quite a nice, because it's happened so many times before.
We went from an opening act to headlining. We were full of ourselves. I mean, we had our own plane, for God's sake. So we could zip from, you know, city to city, and it was wonderful.
They were so filthy rich they couldn't afford to stay in Britain because they could only be there for whatever the restrictions are, 63 days a year for a tax situation. They looked at a lot of different options. One was the US, but they didn't want to use up their days of touring visa, and so they decided on the south of France.
And we rented this villa up in Grasse, which is just north of Antibes in the south of France. Third album, Run With The Pack, we used the Rolling Stones mobile. And we all arrived, and we all having a cup of tea, waiting for the thing to arrive. All of us sat around the table, the road crew, you know, and Paul and myself and Mick and Boz. Suddenly this huge bloody knock on the door. I said, yeah. And it was Mick McKenna, and he was the Stones mobile engineer. I said, it's all right. He says, well, bit of a problem. Can't get the fucking mobile through the gates. It's too wide. You kidding? No, it's about 2 feet too wide.
The truck got stuck about 200 yards short of the house.
And one of Clive's suggestions was to bring in a helicopter and raise it over the wall.
So we called G up, he says, rent another villa. So we rented another villa that did have gates wide enough to accommodate the mobile, and we did the recording there, and we kept the villa where we were and stayed there. So we had more money than sense in those days. No one thought to take a tape measure and measure the bloody mobile, would it get through the gates?
So we had 2 villas on the go at the same time, and defeating the whole object of being residential, commuting from one villa to another.
We always produced ourselves for our faults, but I think we were pretty, I suppose opinionated is the wrong word, but we felt strongly about how we wanted it to sound and which way we wanted the music to go. And we didn't want anybody taking it away from that. We did work with various different people, in different stages of production. We used the guy from Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Kramer, and he was very good. We did some mixes with him in LA, that was great. But I think in all situations, we all overrode their opinions. We knew what we wanted. We maybe used them to help us to get where we wanted to go, but we never actually acknowledged the use of a producer per se. The first 3 were particularly well received and well recorded and very strong. The 4th one wasn't so strong because we'd been on tour, we'd do an album tour. Came to do the 4th album and Paul and I really hadn't got a lot of ideas, so we did the Burning Sky album anyway and knocked together some songs, but we didn't have a good stockpile of songs, which is the best thing to do before you go into a studio. You go in with about 15 or 20 and you end up with about 12 or something. We didn't have about 6 when we went in to do that record, and they weren't all going to make it. So we were writing things in the studio, which is always not a good idea, simply because of the schedule we were at. I mean, it wasn't as if we hadn't had any time off, but when you come off major tours, you don't want to go straight into a studio, so you have a bit of time off ostensibly to write, but I mean, you don't. You just sort of recover from the tour.
We did one tour in America of 70 cities. 70 cities. It was like, where? We didn't know half the time where we were playing. Mick would have to have, hey, Springfield, or hey, Chicago, great to be here. And sometimes we didn't know where we were. It became a big problem for us. It was something that Paul brought up very well. He said, listen, I can't take this endless tour album. I need some time off, man. Give me just a month or 2 months. But don't keep booking things without, consulting us.
We suddenly realised, well, we can't go in and make another record without more preparation, without having more songs. I mean, we got away with the fourth album. It was not a bad album at all. There's some good songs on there. But there wasn't the abundance as there was in the first three, and so we decided to try and make up for that on Destination Angels, which I think we did.
I needed to write a song for the album, and I was thinking, what I'm going to write about now. And I actually had a synth guitar. It was one of the first synth guitars that ever came out, made by Roland. And when you got it going, it made some fantastic sounds. And it had harpsichord sound, it had a bass sound. The guitar could be made to play harpsichord, bass, a guitar, acoustic, everything, all these different sounds. And I was putting all these sounds in, and I hit this sound. Wow, this is like a rock and roll fantasy, this guitar. And I went, aha, that's it. So, and then I wrote, okay, what would a rock and roll fantasy be? Well,
and I'll categorically state that right now, because Paul quit all that stuff in the mid-70s. So he was never involved in any of this. But I did a lot of blow. Boz did, Mick did, the whole Zeppelin camp did. And
they just played Birmingham Odeon, and Dad got me to learn rock and roll fantasy. So when they came over, I played it. But even Paul tells the story. He said, oh yeah, you played Can't Get Enough of Your Love. I went, it wasn't Can't Get Enough of Your Love, I played rock and roll fantasy. So where did you play this? At my house, Mum and Dad's house. Yeah, I was in my pyjamas. I remember being woken up. It's your time, Dad, I come, and just played it. So that was the first time Paul actually turned to Simon and went, "You're fired." It was one of those many times he did.
1980 was a horrible year. Lennon was shot. I believe you'll have to look up the chronology, but I think it was just after Bonzo had died. It was horrible.
When John Bonham passed away, he sort of became a virtual recluse. He took it really hard.
The band had run itself into the ground. We were doing tour album. We were all knackered. And then when John died, Zeppelin broke up. It was like a house of cards, because once Zeppelin went, Peter Grant went into seclusion, there was no one to look after us, bad company.
We'd go to his house for meetings and we wouldn't see him, and we got the feeling that he wasn't really that, well, understandably, he'd lost a lot of enthusiasm for the job. So we soldiered on without him, but that was not very successful. I mean, when you have a band of 4 strong characters and the managers are stronger than any of us, and he's not on the scene, everybody then decides they know best. So we only got 4 people in the band thinking they know best, it's not going to work. At least he was the one we listened to, in terms of touring or recording, not material, but timing and everything. So no, we did an album that was okay, but it was not the same after without Peter's involvement. That was the last album, Rough Diamonds. Then after that, Paul decided he wanted to quit.
By the end of 1979, when we'd done Rough Diamonds, which was really not very good, there'd been a fight between Paul and Boz. Paul had expressed a desire to do his own album, so he was saving songs for his own stuff. Mick wasn't, they weren't collaborating anymore. Mick was writing his own stuff. It happens, it happens with all great songwriting partnerships, that eventually, there'll come a time where you'll save your own stuff for something that you want to do solo. And that's what Paul did, and to a lesser extent Mick.
The thing about music for me is that music is really the most important thing. And we were young and we were successful and we did a lot of partying. And I felt that we were losing touch with the music, and it was getting too much about the partying. It was too much like a shooting star situation, if you know what I mean. And I just felt that we'd lost track of the original fire that we had, and I wanted to get away and do something else, basically.
We weren't getting on, and that was mainly to do because Peter wasn't around. He would always sort out any friction, don't be such an old tart and stuff like that, and get us all unified as a group again. We'd lost that unity.
And I love Paul, and I've respected and admired Paul since 1968. That's how far back we go, and I think he's one of the finest singers ever in the history of singingdom. But I don't know what he got under his bonnet about Boz, because Boz was new on the scene. Christ, he'd been a singer up until 19 73. I mean, he'd only been playing bass a couple of months, you know, when we got hold of him. The thing about Boz was he was very musical, and he wasn't scared to voice his opinion about, you know, almost bloody annoying, actually. You know, we come to the end of this frantic song, this great take, you know, and I go, at the end of on the drums, and he'd go, should we do another one?
Someone would start complaining about how it sounded, and he'd go up to the desk and turn it up full volume and look round and look at everyone and then turn it down and said, well, I used to work in the old days.
We were saying, I know what to do, and Paul said, I know what to do, and you know, Boz. So it was all like 4 different people as opposed to a group. And I think that's at the end, that's when Paul decided he didn't want to do it anymore. And we quit just after that.
Paul said, you know, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to do my own thing. And it was just a general screw-up all round. So that really was the end of Bad Company and the end of Led Zeppelin.
My emphasis has always been about music. Really, that's the thing that's the only reason I do it. It's not to be successful or to be famous. It's to be a songwriter and to sing and to reach out and to connect with people. That's really my thing, you know. And everything else is a side issue, you know. And I felt we were losing touch with that. The idea of playing just to reach people. I don't know. And so I went to seek something else, you know.
I thought at the time that maybe he just wanted some time off, you know, as you sometimes do when you work closely together. You just want a bit of a breather, you know, get on each other's nerves if you're in each other's company all the time.
In the old days, I remember so-and-so leaves the Searchers, end of group, no reunion plan. It was all headlines. But with us, with Free and with Bad Company, it was like we just kind of dissipated and went our own ways.
And also at the time, he was the only one that had kids. See, at the time, none of us had children. He just wanted time apart from the group, spend with his family and do his own thing. So that was probably the right thing to do, because I think if we had continued, somebody might have got hurt along the way. You know, I mean, he was quite heady, and I think his decision to stop was the right one.
It was a horrible time, as I said. 1980 through 82 was an awful time for me personally. You know, I developed an addiction, and I went to treatment. And when I came out, you know, it was all a bit of a downer, really. And I missed the band terribly. I did. I mean, it was a great band, and we made some great music, but we really did need some time off.
The group didn't continue, so we all drifted off into other things. But I think there was a period when we were just hanging around, you know, thinking, well, Paul want to do something soon. But it didn't go that way.
The door was always left open by pretty much, you know, all of us.
Anyway, everybody went off and did whatever they did. Paul did some solo stuff.
What he did cut loose, I think he did his first solo album.
Yeah, and then Paul got involved with Jimmy Page and put together the band called The Firm.
Because of John's death, John Bonham, you know, and Jimmy said to me, well, we should let's form a band and go on tour. And I said, well, you know, I really don't want to get into the grind again, you know. And he said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll make 2 albums and we'll do 2 tours, and that'll be it. That's all we'll do. And I said, okay, that sounds good. And that's what we did.
I did an album called Take This in about 1980-81 with Simon and a few other musicians. Boz often played his jazz.
He loved his jazz, and that's what he ended up doing, getting himself a 10, 12-piece jazz band up in Edinburgh, which he got his rocks off on, so thank goodness he did that.
You know, we all found things to do, but it wasn't as rewarding as being in a group. Particularly Simon, me and Paul have always been band members. You know, when you make a living in that mentality, you depend on the other people you're with.
I met B.B. King and played with him at his club in New York. And we did a song called Every Day of the Blues, which is the first song I played with Paul Kossoff on stage at the Fickle Pickle in Finsbury Park. So for me, it was a fantastic full circle to be playing that song. I met Hubert Sumlin, who is, and played with. He actually played All Right Now with me.
Boz decided he wanted to retire, and Boz just basically stayed in the hammock on the poop deck for 6 years and got browner and browner and browner.
The Four Tops invited me to play at their 50th anniversary in Detroit.
When I met Paul, we were on the same show in Detroit. we were both doing a tribute to the Four Tops.
And that was a real honour, because I didn't even know that they would be aware of me, you know.
Naturally, everyone knows about Paul Rodgers and Bad Company, but I had no idea he was even there.
And I got to sing a couple of songs, a couple of their songs, and they came on stage and they actually stood behind me like I was their lead singer and they were my backing band, which was, I mean, it was a real honour.
To me, Paul Rodgers is one of the most underrated personalities you would ever want to meet. This man has talent beyond talent. This man can sing anything. He can sing the telephone book.
I was watching TV one night and then there was this Brit Awards or something and Queen were on, and then I realised Paul was singing with them. You know, they arranged to do like All Right Now or something together, and I thought, wow, you know, that's great. And then they obviously invited him to be the vocalist for some Queen shows.
I had just played with Brian for an Adolph Robbins charity at Wembley. And so we got talking and he said, you know, we want to play that, but we need a singer. If you'll sing for us, our couple of songs, We Will Rock You and We're the Champions, we'll be your backing band for your song, you know, All Right Now. I said, that sounds like a good deal. And that's what we did. And it was dynamite.
That to me was a great thing. It was just something which was kind of in my blood because we grew up on Free and Bad Company. Freddie was a big fan of Bad Company. So I went on and played with Paul, and it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. There was an instant, easy chemistry there.
People from the bowels of this building where we were rehearsing all came rushing up to see what the excitement was. You know, they were popping their heads in the door. So from the get-go, it was very exciting.
And Paul, as it happened, was in a sort of lull. And Paul told me later that he was considering giving up playing at that point. You know, he was feeling that he wanted to have some more home life and stuff. But I'm afraid we put an end to that.
It was very sad. We found out that Peter Grant had passed away in 1995. Obviously missed him terribly, still do. It was good to see everybody, of course. We'd all lost touch with each other. We'd all gone off and done different things. Yeah, I mean, you know, we never fell out. We just went our own separate ways. So it was kind of nice to hook up, although it was a sad circumstance in which to get everybody together. And Robert Plant suggested to us at the get-together that perhaps we should think about getting back together and doing something, which sowed the seed in everybody's mind, and which eventually led to the 1999 reunion. It was like as if we hadn't stopped. We started playing again, you know, and very quickly we had the old chemistry back, which is quite amazing, really, because everybody had gone off and done loads of different things.
The reunion was not a success, and I think we could all agree that primarily there were two camps. There was Paul and myself, who were sober, and there was Mick and Boz, who weren't. And when I'm trying to maintain sobriety, and I'm only speaking for myself here, and we have, you know, Mick and Boz, who are completely the other way, it led to a huge divide, and we didn't get on. Bottom line is, it was not a success, both commercially or personality-wise. And I think we were all quite glad to see the back of each other. Not so much me and Paul, because I've always gotten on fairly well with Paul. But Boz became a problem. His intake was pretty bad, and you know, it eventually killed him.
It was Boz's belated 60th birthday party, and had some friends staying, some musicians staying, and there was a lot of people arriving later on. I was in the kitchen cooking up a huge buffet, and Boz was wandering around. I think we were watching horse racing. We were betting on the television on Sky, and Boz turned round to his friend Billy and said, "Gadger, life doesn't get any better than this." And he walked outside onto the patio and picked up Alvin's guitar and said to Tam White, he said, no, that's the wrong note for this tune. And he's going, "This is how it's played." And the next thing we heard was the guitar hitting the floor. And that was that, I'm afraid.
Well, it affected me a lot. I was very, very upset and obviously saddened. He was a great friend of mine. Probably in the group we were the closest to, I mean, he got on with everybody, but me and him used to hang out a lot and used to go out together, and if we shared a house on tour, we'd share it together, So I was very good friends with him, and he was a lovely guy. And it did change, the band. We plodded on without him, but I do miss him terribly. Yeah, he was a great character in the band.
Boz did drink heavily. Some would say detrimentally so. I wouldn't agree with that, because in all the times that I saw him drinking, he was always practicing, working, recording, laughing, listening, understanding, philosophizing. He lived a full life. Alcohol didn't prevent any of these things. He was never the curtains closed, on your own bevy merchant. He wasn't one of those guys. He drank socially. He enjoyed drinking. I never saw it as a bad thing.
He did have an incredible tolerance for stimulants, and he could actually function because he would play in whatever state he was in. He just wanted to continue doing what he liked to do. That's if he could, and any excuse really to be playing or to be listening to music. He didn't believe in going out on a half-life.
She's gone, gone, gone. I don't know if I'm happy, I don't know if I'm sad. She's gone.
He was just something else, and if you could have seen him play in the last few years of his life, he became a world-class bass player. Phenomenal.
The whole reason we got back together was there was concern about the trademark of the name. And because the band wasn't working, there was a danger that other people might use the name and all these sort of things. So the obvious thing was to do something. Well, Paul was still in Queen, and so I said, well, why don't we just do a gig? At least then it can be seen that we are working as Bad Company, with Simon and me and Paul, obviously without poor old Boz. So that's what we did. We did a gig in Florida at the Hard Rock, August 2008.
Wonderful. I got to say, that was absolutely came out of the blue. I can't even remember why we did it.
The name was being plagiarized by certain people. In fact, Mick himself took it out on the road, and I didn't like that. And I decided that what we needed was to pull the thing together, to have a new contract between us, which stated that none of us could play without the other's permission or use the name. So we said, in order to define that, we would do a show. We would video the show, DVD the show, and we would release it. Well, we had a good time playing that show, and the audience was fantastic.
So it was yet another kind of reformation, I suppose, but it was like we hadn't stopped. It was great.
We filmed it, and Paul did some remixing of the tapes, and it was a big success. And it paved the way to do these 10 shows earlier in 2009 when we did the East Coast of America.
We were all a bit, not quite sure how it would be without Boz and how we'd be received. But of course, as soon as we started playing and the audiences responded so well that we
we felt good about it again, you know, despite Boz not being there. It was the song still came across quite fresh, and it was suddenly as if we hadn't stopped, but there was a long period in between where we hadn't done anything.
There was Mick and there was Paul and there was myself, and we had Howard Leese and Lynn Sorensen from Paul's solo band, and it was a wonderful combination.
All I've ever wanted to do is be in a band, and the band I've been in the longest is Bad Company, and I can do that. I'm good at that. I think everybody else probably feels the same. I mean, we've all done different things in the interim, but nothing as rewarding, for me anyway.
Well, I've just come off tour, and I said, I'm not going to do another 3-month tour, thank you, not straight off the bat, but we can do a couple of dates. So we end up doing these 10 dates.
The 10 shows in 2009 were some of the best that I've ever experienced in any band.
But whether we go beyond that into recording new stuff is you know, we could. No reason not to.
So it was a bit like the early days of Bad Company, where we had left behind those demons and we were now playing unfettered, unchained, and just having a ball.
I wasn't quite sure what to expect because it's been such a long time, and
considering we hadn't played for like 10 years.
Yeah. Somebody said to me, "Is it like riding a bike?" I said, "No, it's like riding a wild stallion."
I like that.
You don't forget how to do it, but it doesn't make it any less dangerous.
Yeah. No, I like that.
If you put that top lip in first.
And here we go. Jolly good, eh, Chris? All right, buddy.
Great show.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you, my friend. Show me the way, fellas. I'm always trying to hear what Paul's doing and try to, you know, supplement it, complement it, whatever, back it up. Like you said earlier on, you've got to have a structure. You can't be too free-form, but there's certain times in songs that, you know, he'll do something and I'll try and back it up rather than ride over it.
Yeah, Paul goes somewhere, we'll go there with it, you know, or whatever way, you know, it's just at the moment, whatever.
Yeah, we'll go run with it. And
whatever dictates, you know, the mood of the audience or the way we're feeling, and we're always right there to complement that, and it's just a natural thing we do. It's not like a problem for any of us.
It's a magical experience. Pretty much every night I have to pinch myself once in a while because I'll be standing there next to him and I look back and there's Simon and I'm going, wow, these are the guys that I grew up just loving. They're playing their music. I think Paul's the greatest rock singer that's ever lived. And to this day, I mean, he hasn't lost a step. A lot of singers of his generation are substituting the high notes for lower notes or tuning down a little bit. But Paul, we play everything in A440 concert pitch, the same as the records. A lot of the times I'm playing, I'm thinking about what I'm doing. But now and then I get a chance and I'm just listening to him play and sing while I'm playing, and it's a magical feeling.
All of the gigs all of the shows have been exceptional.
And the UK tour was another endorsement of that. You know, the response was great and we played well.
Good morning. Hello, Chris.
Mick, Sid, how you doing?
We're going to play and then talk, or talk and then play, or what?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll walk in at 3 o'clock. Nicky Horn will get up and make an introduction. You'll play, do a photo session, then do the Q&A. And then a signing of a guitar that we'll present to the Hard Rock, and then dinner. Yeah. Right?
Getting too old for this shit.
You're gonna have to whip me into shape here.
Hello. This was the first Hard Rock ever. Many people know that. What?
There's your drum head.
All right. Ah, Boz is up there, look at that.
I was in the States last year for 10 shows, and then when I come home, my friends and family were asking, you know, is the UK thing going to happen? I said, well, sworn to secrecy, but possibly, you know.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome a true supergroup? Ladies and gentlemen, Bad Company.
Don't you know that you are a shooting star? Keep on shining somewhere there with you. Don't you know that you are a shooting star? All the world will love you just as long as you are.
I like that sound, basically.
Classic
like
British rock sound.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we're missing, you know.
Well, that went well, didn't it? It was really good. I thought they were fantastic. That kind of chemistry is still there. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Come on, Pete. Are you all right?
Hello. Nice to see you. First gig, lovely.
It would be nice to do some more, and it'd be also nice to do some new stuff if that's the way it's going to. I mean, I haven't written for a long time, I must be honest. I haven't really felt like it. You know, you go through a patch when you're not working, and then you have the marital problems, whatever, you know, all that stuff, and you don't feel like writing anything. There's nothing to write about that's good. I like to write about stuff that's good, you know, not miserable stuff. So, but I'm starting to write again now. I'm feeling good about everything. And having the band there as a vehicle is an incentive. Because I've always written for a band, you know, and when Bad Company stopped, there was no vehicle. Although I kept writing, it was all kinds of various stuff. At least having Bad Company there gives me a focus to think, well, if there is a certain thing that we do, whatever it is, you know, like it or not. So I'm trying to tailor the stuff I'm writing to fit that bill, you know, keep it up to date, but still keep the essence of what we did in the early days. And Paul played a couple of things and I picked up on them and I said, oh, what's that, you know? Like little glimpses of things. It would be nice if we did some new stuff. We shall see.
Who knows? I mean, we're fit, sober, and who knows what the future will bring. But I really hope that we can do some shows together in the future.
As long as there's a market there and a demand for it and we're enjoying it, there's no reason not to do it, as long as we physically can. I don't think any of us want to do marathon tours anymore. We're too old for that.
I would love to do another album.
You can't predict it, really. You just have to see how it goes, but hopefully there'll be more.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely.
I'm going to take a break and I'm going to focus on songwriting. Songwriting, really, you know, that's where everything it kind of stems from, and I'll see where that takes me.